Hello, everybody, and greetings from the Pleasant Hill store. I'm Shannon Fitzpatrick, extremely excited to be here this evening. We were talking about this, Jen and I were talking about this class ahead of time, just because it did seem so basic that I was concerned nobody would want to, sign up. I mean, obviously, if you're going to plant a plant, you take it out of its plastic pot that it came in, you put it in the ground, you put it into a new pot, like, ta-da, it's done. But I thought I would try to give you some basics of things that are not, specifically just take it out of here, put it into there, but things to look for, things that are super helpful, things that are that you're not going to want to forget to do. Things that could be issues, things to maybe do ahead of time so that there aren't any issues. So like I said, definitely, a more basic class, but hopefully some things that as you're moving forward in your gardening journey will be the things that you fall back to, like, oh, that's right. This is the time when I should such and such, or, you open a plant and you see something and you don't have to freak out because we've already talked about, what to do in that instance. I did include, I think, in the outline, like a really basic supply list. Just obviously the soil, I have some clippers, I have gloves. I'm terrible about gloves. I feel like we're always preaching, like, put your gloves on, and I'm terrible because I get to moving around and I forget. And so much of our soil has just like little fine bark in it. I am like the queen of splinters that you cannot see because they're so tiny, and it's just from digging in the dirt when I should have put my gloves on first. So I'm going to lead by example this evening. I'm going to put my gloves on just to get us started. I brought a few plants today just so that we could, again, have a really quick idea. This is a quick class. I promise I won't be here long, but just so that you have an idea of, well, she didn't mention this. I can't bring every plant. I almost brought a tree in here, but I'm in like this little room in the Pleasant Hill store. But I felt like it was like the perfect example of what I wanted to talk about how things can get really root bound. So I'm saving you from the tree mess that I could have made, but I tried to get a couple different sizes and just styles and things like that. And I'm doing this video by myself today, so Jen's gonna tell me when to run up and say, okay, show it a little closer or whatever, so you guys will have to bear with us today. So I have a succulent here. These are really easy because their root systems are really small. So we're gonna talk a little bit about roots and stuff like that, and I'm gonna make a mess, so you guys are gonna have to forgive me. Roots for succulents, again, really small, so when you pull the dirt away and stuff from it, is it close enough there? And again, I'm gonna make a mess, just bear with me.
Yeah, Shannon, I would even say, like, even just how you got them out of the pot, because sometimes that's not super intuitive.
Absolutely. So for this one, you're right, I'm sorry, let me back up. So this one is really simple because it's an easy pop out, but for succulents or for anything that you feel like is going to kind of slide out easily, I always put my hand over the top, turn it upside down, and then if this will lift off nicely, then kudos. That's a good one. We're going to get to some that aren't so easy. One of the things that's a good kind of reminder is, and I should back up with this, is it depends on which plant you're planting. If you're doing succulents, if you're going to do like a small kind of a 4-inch, if you're going to plant something like this into a pot this size, something pretty simple and a little bit smaller, that's one possibility. If you're going for more of a gallon size and you want something more substantial, I've got a big rosemary here, which I refuse to bring a pot for because there's just not enough space. But we'll talk about how to get this ready to go into the ground. So once you have your plant, obviously you already have an idea of where it's going to go. You've already decided on the container size, or what kind of container you want, or if you're going to put it in the ground. For succulents, they don't have a huge root system, and so a nice shallow bowl works really well for them. They don't need a whole lot, and so something like this would fit really nicely in there right up on the top. So this is where he will live. again, we already talked about Mr. 4-inch here. You know, you want something that's gonna be at least double the size of the pot that it came in, just so that it has some space to grow. I think that's the big thing, especially with pots, is if you have a pot that you love and you want to put a plant in it, then you start from the pot and you work backwards, and you have to get a plant that's small enough that it'll have some time to grow into this pot that you love. But conversely, if you have a plant that you love and you want it to last forever, and you don't want to be repotting it every 5 minutes, then you need to pick a pot that's big enough for it. So again, with this 4-inch, you know, with this, like I've got plenty of space here, you know, there's plenty of room for this guy to grow. To me, I always think if I at least have a year or so before I have to fool with it again, I'm happy with that. But again, you have to decide how much you want to be repotting things. And if they're happy and you gave it fertilizer and you watered it, they're gonna grow. In the end, that is the point.
What
So
size is that? What size is that gray pot?
This gray pot,
yeah.
this is a 9-inch.
Okay.
So I have a quart or 4-inch, you know, plant here. I'm putting it into a 9-inch pot. So again, somewhere around double, I think, is a good kind of starting point. I know as you get bigger, it's a little bit tougher. Some of the bigger pots are wider across the top and maybe not as deep, or, you know, the opposite. They're, you know, tall and thin, but there's a lot of space for that root growth, you know, down below. So again, you have to decide which is the more important thing. Is the more important thing that you use this pot that goes with whatever your setup is, or is this plant the most important thing and you want it to have the best possible, you know, setup that you can have there? So, and obviously there's lots of different choices in terms of whether you're putting something into the ground, whether you're doing these size pots. You know, we've got those big, you know, Mamba Jamba pots out there. There's the big boxes, you know, a 24-inch box that, you know, some of those huge trees come in. So there's tons of possibility. Again, picking the right pot ahead of time will make everything so much easier. So that's your pre-homework, is to, whatever the plant is, pick the right pot. Whatever the pot is, you know, then pick the right plant. So you're either planning and going forward, or you're planning and going backward, depending on which one it is that you know, are starting with, what the love is that you've got there. So as Jen pointed out, with this one, the succulent, it's easier for me to hold it upside down to take it out. And again, I'm just messing up the roots. I can do it with my hands because there's, you know, nothing, there's no root boundness in here. I'll come forward.
Yeah, do you have to worry that you're messing up the roots too much, or do you just like a little bit, or I mean, yeah, that's a decent amount.
So
yeah.
I think it depends on the size of the plant. You know, obviously smaller, more delicate plants with smaller root systems, you have to have some kind of, you know, you can't go too crazy with it. You definitely want to pull off some of that dirt, get that root ball exposed, get some of those roots, because, you know, that's really where you want it to be. Now with some, especially with succulents, if they're tall and you don't want them to be too weeble wobble, don't do this at all. Take them out, you know, of whatever the pot is, and we're going to talk about how to just set them directly into another pot. But with those, or anything like that, I say that also with house plants, like with those tall dracaenas, don't mess with the root ball. If you're going to replant it, just take it out, make sure that the hole, you know, that you've got in whatever your larger size pot is the right size, and then just plop that baby in there and do not touch it. You're just going to add soil and stuff, you know, around the sides. And we'll get to that. But again, those are the two circumstances that I would say you really want to be careful with roots, or maybe not mess with roots, is that they're small and delicate. I mean, succulents aren't really delicate, I would say, but, you know, they've got smaller root systems, so you can't go too crazy. I'm just using my hands and not the clippers or anything, you know, a little rougher at this point in time. But you know, use that elbow grease. You definitely are you're gonna get dirty, and it's okay, and you're gonna probably pull a little bit of it away, and even that is okay. So with this guy, small ribbed pot, a good size for it. It's got a drainage hole. That's a big one. Can you see that? You tell me if I need to move, Jen. It's got a drainage hole.
No, we see it.
Okay. And then if you don't know about keeper stoppers, I don't know who you're shopping with. You need to come to the Pleasant Hill store if you don't know about keeper stoppers. So it's this little mesh. It looks like the mesh that is like a window screen. It's like a little circle that's cut out. Can you see this? Am I doing this correctly?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this guy is going to cover that hole so that when you water it, that all the, the dirt doesn't come out, that you can protect it from, little bugs climbing up into it from the bottom and kind of inhabiting all in that root system. So if you are not a keeper stopper user, you should be. So the keeper stopper goes right over the hole. And with this, this is a pretty good size keeper stopper. I always cut them in half or cut them in a quarter, then you're using more of them. There's a lot of pots that have multiple holes when they get big. So again, cut it in half, cut it into thirds, and then you're just gonna plop it right over that hole there. And this one, because it's the terracotta and it's not super smooth at the bottom, it's got that bump, it's okay. It doesn't have to lay perfectly flat. You're just gonna lay it over there because once the dirt gets in, you're good to go anyway. So, okay. All right, so there's the pot. You always wanna start with some soil at the bottom. People often ask, well, do I just put it right in there? I mean, and again, I guess it depends on how much bigger your pot is than your plant. But in this case, we definitely have some space there. So, my work surface is getting crowded. Okay. So again, because I have a small root system, I'm going to come closer so I don't make a huge mess. So you can see that it's about 3 or so inches from the top. It's really just enough to cover the bottom, and I have kind of a little divot, like it was a coffee filter. Yeah, so just like a little coffee filter in there, so that their root system will sit right there. There's a little hole kind of for it to sit for the roots. We're big fertilizer people here at Slope, so we are going to put fertilizer in everything. And I love Sure Start. If you don't know about Sure Start, you should. It is the best fertilizer that we offer for getting a good start. It's got all sorts of the beneficial microbes in there. So I'm just going to use a little baby handful. And you'll note I'm putting it in there before I put the plant. I'm just going to kind of sprinkle it down into the hole where I'm going to set it. And I realize you can't see this perfectly, but it's just kind of a dusting. Okay, just kind of a dusting. The other thing about putting these plants back in is that they need to get packed back in. I mean, you'll notice when you pull them out of their plastic pot that they were in there good, like they were packed in. So you need to be able to, repeat that afterwards. After you've taken it out and you put it into its next size up. And I always think it by hand is a little bit easier, especially with something this small. But I just start working it around the sides. Kind of like if I was decorating a cake.
And Shannon, you're using the cactus mix, right?
I am on this one. I'm using a cactus and succulent mix for this guy. Yes. And for all the reasons that this soil represents, I guess, the best copy of where they grow naturally. The soil where they grow naturally, it's got a lot of aeration in it. It's got a lot of sand. It's got a lot of rocks. It has a lot of kind of bigger pieces that allow the water to filter through really quickly. When you think of out there in the desert, like what that soil is like, the water runs through really fast. And so this soil is meant to be exactly the same. It's meant to be so that it runs through really quick. Cactus and succulent don't like to sit in water for long. So the whole point of this one is that it just runs through there, gets them nice and wet, gets them nourished, and then it's out. So this soil for a cactus and succulent is the best for my little echeveria here. And again, you can see I'm really patting it down in there, and I'm just going around the edges I want to get that root system packed in there really good. And you're going to get some, especially with these echeverias and things like that, you're going to get some in the little leaves, but that's okay. If you're like super OCD like me, you come later with like your tweezers or something and you like get really crazy. When you water it, it'll also wash some of it out, but I won't talk bad about you if you get your tweezers out also.
I use the air compressor for the
Oh, totally. Yes.
typewriter over the keyboard.
Absolutely. Yes. We all have our little tools of the trade. I've done a lot of custom pots with succulents, especially the little ones. And then especially when you put rocks on the top, oh my gosh, those little rocks go everywhere. They'll make you earn every dollar. Okay.
So is that sorry, one more while you're on that, do you use that same soil in the ground or is that just for containers?
No, this one is for both. If you're putting them into, I mean, our soil here is the antithesis of the soil there. We've got that clay, you know, it seems like there's water kind of caught everywhere, and this is the opposite of that. So if you're putting it into the ground, you need to amend that soil. You need to make sure that everything around that's touching the cactus and succulents is the cactus and succulent mix. You can mix in a little bit of planting if you want to, but as much of the clay that you can get out of there, get it out of there. Yeah, they just don't do as well. Okay, so again, I'm kind of pushing this down all the way around to get it packed in there really good. If you want to, and you're like me, you do a little bit more fertilizer. Again, just a little baby sprinkle there. And you'll note that I am not right up at the edge. Can you see that? There's about a ½ inch all the way around on the inside. And that's so when you water it, it doesn't immediately go rolling right over the side. You need to leave a little bit of space. And I mean, the bigger the pot, the more space that you're going to use because there'll be more water. But this is a little guy, so a little ½ inch is fine. But definitely leave some room there at the top so that when you water, it has a space to kind of fill, and then it'll kind of deplete into, into the plants and into that soil and drain out. So to leave a little bit of room there. So for this guy, he's good to go. That is it. And you would do the exact same thing if it was in the ground, obviously other than using the pot and stuff. But same thing, you're gonna dig a good sized hole, you're gonna amend on the bottom with that cactus and succulent mix. And then as you put it in, you're gonna fill all the way around it, make sure that it's nice and compacted. No problem, you can do it right in the ground also. I'm gonna try to go quickly. I know we don't have a lot of time this evening. This is our 4-inch and same thing. So I can't grab it over the top, obviously, because it kind of looks like my hair. so I'm gonna kind of pull it from the side like it was a ponytail. And again, I'm just like holding it. I'm just holding it so that as I let it go, and you just want to kind of manipulate the pot a little bit. As you squish it and swash it and maybe turn a little bit, it loosens everything in there, and then it should slide right out for you. And so hopefully you can see this pretty good. There's a pretty decent kind of webbing of roots and stuff there. And we don't have to tear it up, but we're gonna loosen it a little bit. So same thing, where's my pot for you? This has like little baby size holes. Again, if I was gonna keep this in there, then I would even put some keeper stoppers down there, but for sake of our time, I am not. I've got some potting soil here. Again, just kind of halfway done there, maybe a little bit more. The nice thing about this one is that it hasn't been sitting in here long. I kind of cheated, but I want you to know that some of them are going to come and still be pretty fresh, and you're not going to have to do a bunch of messing around. It's been watered recently. It's not really tangled around. It doesn't, like, as soon as you press it, it starts falling apart. So you can tell that that soil is nice and fresh. So again, I'm just gonna, I know it's not the best word, but I'm just mushing it. I'm just kind of using my fingers to, push out any extra like piles of dirt that are set in there. And again, now you can see where the root system is just hanging there. So that's perfect. So now we can just, again, fertilizer, sure start, every time. Sprinkle, sprinkle, fairy dust. And then we're just gonna set this guy right there in the middle. And again, as you're setting it in there, keep in mind what I was saying earlier about your soil surface. You want it to be right at kind of the plant and root ball tip, where they meet, where the base of the plant and that root ball meet is where you want your soil surface to be. And when you pull it out of the pot, and 9 times out of 10, it's gonna be right there. But again, you just wanna follow that. And so when you set it in your pot, and again, this one's kind of got a lot of leaves and branches going on, a little messy, but it's about almost an inch down from the top. Again, not sure if you can see that, but where it's sitting all on its own, about an inch down from the top. To me, this is also a good time while you're kind of filling it to make sure that this guy is standing up straight. So that as you're adding soil, again, it's like a cake turner. I do some on one side, I kind of spin it around. Do some on the other side, spin it around.
Shannon, when you're talking about in the pot, how it's about an inch below the rim,
Right.
If you're planting it in the ground, what level do you want the soil to be at? I mean, do you want it to cover the bottom of the plant? No.
Well, so that's where you want that that kind of the base of the plant and the root ball. There is, I should have showed you better on the echeveria, but there's a distinct spot there. You're not in there real good yet. I know you don't mind coming out. Hold on, I'll come your way. So literally, sorry, my gloves are kind of in the way. You can see that the base of the plant and where the roots start. Come on, Shannon here, get out of the way there. Are like right there. So when you put it in the ground, that's your point. Obviously, you don't have to worry about water spilling out when you're putting it in the ground, but you don't want to go any further up than that because then they get all suffocated and fussy and then they'll start dying and you'll have no idea why because you'll be watering them good and they'll be fully fertilized and it'll make no sense. So you don't want to go up too far, but you don't want the roots to be exposed either. So right there, there's like a sweet spot right there, and that's where you want to put it. Okay, back in the mix there, buddy.
Yeah, I feel like I see that a lot. Like people plant them deeper because they feel like it needs to have a water reservoir or something, but like you can totally rot out the plant pretty quick.
Yeah, you find it a lot, especially with any kind of trees that have a trunk of any kind. You know, that knob there, they tend to feel like that is like that's got to be covered. That is, you know, that's underground business. You know, that's part of the growing process. And it's not. Everything from that point and below is, but that point there, it is. It's the first to get rotted. It's the first to get any kind of fungus. Like it's the first if it's sitting in any kind of water or it's got that wet soil on it, it's done. And as most of you know, you cannot come back from rotted plants on the inside. You know, once it's, you can come back and a lot of times from not enough water, but too much water, there's not a spray, there's not a granular, there's nothing. So you really want to be careful about making sure that you're putting it at the right level so that it's not suffocated and that soil is not going too far up and crowding it and causing any of that fungus and that rot to take place. Okay, so I'm just going to add a little bit more soil. And again, you can see I'm not being super kind. You got to show that plant who's boss first, right out of the gate. So again, I'm just going to press it down, make sure it's nice and tight in there.
So in that plant, if it was in the ground, would you use a planting mix instead of the potting soil?
Absolutely. So anything that's going in the ground needs some kind of planting mix. We are super fortunate here at Slope that we have so many different types of soils. Like we get very specific about things. If you have something that's an acid lover, then you're going to want to use like that acid mix, you know, that is our planting mix. That's for azaleas and camellias and rhodies and hydrangea and various other kind of acid loving plants. So, and that you can use in a potting or and as a pot or in the ground. But it's a good mix specifically for that. Again, we've got like a citrus and palm that really works well for citrus trees, for palms. They don't seem like they should be in the same category, but they have a lot of the same kind of, you know, drainage and soil component needs. And so they work really well as a duo. And again, if you're putting it in a pot, use that. If you're putting it in the ground, use that. The sole difference is that our potting soil, the organic and the regular potting soil, this is the organic with the little green tag there. The one on the floor I have here is the regular. They're made specifically to be used in pots. They have better water retention components. The amendments that are in them make it so that, you know, when you're watering things in the pot, that it doesn't run right out. You know, there's a little bit more of like core and peat moss type things that will, again, hold that water in there and allow that water to stay for longer. Whereas with the planting mix, you know, it's made specifically for this area. We call it the Diablo mix, you know, if you buy it in bulk from topsoil, because it's made for our area, for this clay soil. That planting mix does exactly what it's supposed to do to kind of combat that clay and give you that good drainage if you're putting it right in the ground. So this is just a nemesia. It's a really pretty pollinator and a perennial. And if you're putting it in the ground, definitely do exactly what we just did here, but use a planting mix. And then with the putting it in a pot, using the potting soil. And again, only difference is, like Jen pointed out, that you're not gonna have to worry about any, you know, surface levels or anything like that with watering. But again, mine is about an inch or so down there. Not sure if you can see that. So when I water it, it won't spill right out. Okay, so there's two done. Now we're getting to the hard stuff. I feel like those were easy, so we'll start with those. Okay, so this guy has been here living with us for a little bit too long. Mr. Gazania probably should have been at your house and growing in your yard by now, but he's still here at Sloat and Pleasant Hill, and so he has seen better days. So when they get like this, it's harder to get them out of the pot. They are, again, you can see that he's been in there for a minute. He's not exactly happy, and I can tell even by touching it that it's super tight. There's no give there at all. So I'm assuming that it's pretty root bound, and that's kind of how you can tell. Like with the nemesia, when I squashed it, even from the outside, it had give. And when you're working with plants that don't have any give, it's a really good indication that they're probably root bound in there, and that you're going to have to use a little bit of extra elbow grease. So on this one, you guys will have to forgive my mess. Again, don't be afraid to use the elbow grease. I always, and it's a little easier outside, I lay them down on the ground and I put some pressure on it. Can you see this, Jen? Am I doing this right in the camera?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
We can see it. I've stomped on them before.
Yeah, totally.
So,
I mean, yeah, it can be hard. Like if you're outside and working on the ground, if your hands are not enough, I can start to feel some give now, but I would literally put my knee down on it. I would get friends to join in, whatever you have to do. And again, it's really just because you want it to come out of there. If it wasn't that, then I wouldn't be able to get it out. I would tear this whole top off, you know, just fighting to get it out of the pot if I didn't loosen it up beforehand. So again, now that I can feel that it's loose and there's some give in there, I'm going to grab it by its ponytail, and just to hold it, I'm not really squashing it. It's just so that it doesn't fall out. I'm going to tip it upside down, give it a little bit of a shake. Oh, I'm so sorry, Mr. Gazania. Oh, it's sad. Okay, so let me come your way. So like I said, Mr. Gazania has been here too long. So he's really tight there. The roots are wound and wound and wound around each other. You know, when it gets in that pot, the roots come out and they stop when they get to a surface. So when it gets to the bottom of the pot, or if the roots are growing to the side, when they get to the side, and then they just start circulating. They circulate the pot, they circulate each other. It can be quite a to-do to get these undone sometimes. So this one is, like I said, been in there for a minute. It's going to take a little bit for us to get him loosened up. But I did cheat a little bit ahead of time. I watered it so that we'd at least be able to make some headway without me sweating. It's like 90 degrees in Pleasant Hill today, so I'm already sweating. We don't need all that. Okay.
It is good that they're watered though too before you plant, right? So,
absolutely. Yeah. It just makes it so much easier. And sometimes it can be a little bit messier, then you have mud instead of just, dirt, but so much easier in terms of, that's why you have your gloves on and your not cute clothes. So in this case, I love my little clippers. I have Coronas here, and I use these for everything. They are, I think they're the 1-inch pruners. They're like tough or strong enough, thick enough that they can cut all the way through a 1-inch branch. They come in, different strength sizes, is the specificity that I can find for them. But this one is a 1-inch, so he's a tough guy. It's got a nice little clamp on it so that people like me who are always doing a little bit too much, I can close them up and then I don't stab myself or anything else, or scrape anything or scratch anything. So it's got a nice little clamp on it there. I like these to use in this case, but you can also use just a regular hand shovel. I would say try to use one with a bit of a spade at the top, so it's got the point. I have this rounded shovel for scooping. Like, this is easier for scooping, but if I need to dig in something, I want it, with a little bit of a sharper edge. So you want something that's more like a spade shape for this. But again, I'm going to use my clippers because I like to. And if you're squeamish, look away. But we're gonna go in. I feel like a surgeon. So I'm gonna use it almost like a knife. So the way that I hold it in my hand is, and you're gonna do what's called scoring it. So you're gonna kind of drag those roots, from the bottom up, and you're gonna make some cuts so that it starts to loosen up. Again, I cheated a little bit with it being wet, but that's okay. So even at the bottom, we're gonna pull that piece of root that's all twisted there. We're just gonna get rid of it. Again, I apologize. You guys can send me evil letters later, but it has to go. It's not good for the plant. So now we have something that looks a lot more like the Nemesia now. It's pretty moist. I can still feel that there's a decent amount of, it's almost like a web, like a really tight web in there. So you just want to, again, kind of mush around it. You're not trying to pull it off. I just want to, maybe massage is a better word than mush. But I just want to massage it a little bit so that I can get, a good amount. And like, look at this. This is,
I feel like the plant likes it. It can like stretch out and like get some, stretch the little legs out or whatever.
Right? It's like getting up out of your seat when you're flying on an airplane.
100%.
Your whole body is like, oh, thank you. I totally agree. I totally agree that the plant likes it. It looks like it doesn't like it, but I agree. It gets all that baggage off. All that extra dirt, and again, those roots at the bottom weren't even viable roots anymore. They had strangled themselves, and so they weren't even really doing anything. So now he looks like a little baby pineapple, and he's ready to roll. So let's find him a pot. Again, this was the size he started in. This is the size I'm putting him in. This is a 1 gallon. This is a 12-inch, and I realize that it's not the exact same going from like gallon to inch size, but as you're looking at it now, it's definitely at least double the size. And sometimes you have to just eyeball it and trust yourself, knowing that you're going to take some of this dirt off. So since he has a hole, I am going to give him a keeper stopper. Did I mention the love that I have for keeper stoppers? It is deep. Okay, so good size hole there. I'm gonna cover it up so that all my dirt doesn't go rolling out when I water it. And that, you know, we have a ton of people that ask about earwigs or pincher bugs, depending on how you refer to them. They are good for coming up that hole. They are good for, I mean, and then you're like, I don't understand. I don't see them climbing out the side and stuff, but they're all inside there. They're not climbing up the side. They're, you know, in most cases coming up from the bottom. You know, with most of these big pots, they've been sitting there a while, you know, and if you have it sitting straight onto the ground, it's almost like one big happy, you know, environment there. So you have to put some stopper there to keep them from coming into the pots. And that keeper stopper is the one. So.
Yeah, I'll even see slugs too. Slugs all under in the underneath the keeper stopper. It stops the slugs and the earwigs.
Yeah, it's kind of nasty. And there you are, Mr. Earwig. Sorry, he had to go. He was coming after my plant. So I will sometimes, if it's not bad, I don't know if this is, somebody's gonna send a letter and say, you shouldn't do that. But sometimes if the soil is not bad, I'll reuse it in the pot. Like I'll put it down at the bottom. I might get in trouble for this. This might be my last webinar, you guys, but.
No, I do it too. I'll support your choice on that.
Me and Jen are on our way out. But yeah, I mean, in a lot of cases, all I did was pull away, you know, soil that was wrapped around that. And if it was really bad where this one, you know, wasn't, I pulled off, like I'm not using that big chunk of yucky roots and stuff like that. That's nasty. But I am going to use the stuff that was kind of all mixed in that I massaged out to loosen up those roots. But, you know, it's not bad soil. And I'm going to give it a nice little refresher with new soil and fertilizer and stuff. So. Plus, what is it? Waste not, want not. So here we go. Recycle, reuse, all those good taglines. Okay. All right, so definitely need a little bit more. I mean, and this is how I judge, because sometimes it's hard to eyeball and you end up with all this soil and then you have to take it all out. So I kind of hold it up where I think that you know, point should be. Again, right here is what we're going for, right at the bottom, the base of the plant, right where it kind of meets that root system. So I'll hold that like about an inch down and just kind of try to eyeball where I think inside that soil is going to mix. I think that's safe enough. Fertilize, fertilize, fertilize. All right, Mr. Gazania, here you go. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but I think the Gazania is singing. It is so happy. It loves its new home.
Do you I just noticed, and I get kind of obsessive, but like the dead leaves at the bottom of the plant, I mean, do you rip those off? I usually do when I plant.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, but I mean, I'm the person that gets tweezers out to get little baby pieces of dirt off of an echeveria. Do I leave like dead leaves? Heavens no. But for the sake of everybody having dinner tonight, yeah, if this is your plants, please, please, please give it a nice haircut. It'll do so much better. It'll be so much happier and it'll look so much better and it will spur on new growth, just the way that getting, you know, a real haircut does. Okay, so I'm gonna pack that down in there.
Yeah, that's gonna fill out that pot super quick too.
Yeah,
I can tell it's happy.
Oh,
yeah.
This thing's gonna be so happy. All right, one more. You know, the one thing that I should have brought that I didn't bring, because it's one thing that I feel like a lot of people struggle with, is I should have brought like a vine, like repotting and actually potting a vine, because if you tune in for the container gardening, I promise I'll do something with a vine that's staked, because those things I feel like they're daunting, you know. It's another one where unless it's really badly root bound, if it has the little teepee, the teepee stakes, I don't mess with it. If it's in there and it looks happy, like I'll rub some of the dirt kind of off the top and break it away and maybe, you know, massage a little bit at the bottom. But if it's staked and it's already wound and it's happy, I try not to interrupt that flow. So know that with anything that you want to stand up straight, and again, this is true with houseplants, when you're kind of repotting or potting, you know, a houseplant, it's okay to use a stake. You know, after you mess with their home and kind of, you know, muddle things up a little bit, in some cases they're going to be kind of, I don't know where I am anymore. And, you know, you can stake them. I always wait until the end to stake it, because I've seen other people, like I said, if it comes pre-staked, I will leave it alone. But if it doesn't come pre-staked, I wait until it's like this, and I'm like, okay, it's happy, it's set now. I take the stake and I, you know, put it in where I want it to be so that it gives the best, you know, I want it to be as straight as possible. That's when you decide what your front is, you know, what's the, you know, part that's going to be your show off piece. Putting that stake behind and making sure that it's as, you know, as upright as it possibly can be. Whether and there's a million different stakes that you guys all know. So, okay. So I think everybody's happy. He's about an inch or so from the top. I will give him a haircut later. I promise I will not let him live like this. And then water, which I'm not going to do because I am in no mood to clean up mud all over the place this evening. But water, water, water. You want to, you know, water enough that it fills, and then you want to wait. And as you see it go down, water again till it fills, and then till you see it go down. And then once you see it running out of the bottom, I feel like it's a really fair test of when it's fully watered. I have this conversation with people all the time who are just asking about watering. I swear we should do a class. I know we talked about this on how to water, because it doesn't seem like that's as intuitive as it should be, or as we kind of assume that it is. But you really want everything in your pot to be soaked. You want every ounce of soil when you water something, especially that's in a pot, but even in the ground. You want every ounce of soil around it to be wet so that it has the best chance of holding on to that water as long as possible. If you're paying a water bill right now, you know that you want to water as little as possible. So long, deep soaks are much better than these, you know, short little baby rains that I think we're more accustomed to making. And you can do long, deep soaks even with an irrigation system. I feel people often say, well, I have a drip. You can still do the same thing with a drip system. It won't preclude you from doing long, deep soaks also. So water, water, water until it's running out of there, until you're like, oh, that's kind of heavy. Leave it there, let it run all the way out, you know what I mean? And then you can move it wherever it's supposed to go. I think that's it. I was gonna fool with this rosemary, but I feel like it's really just more of the same. And I can if you want me to, but it's another one that I think is pretty root bound in there, and it's another one that you really want to roll out. But I feel like the gazania gave us kind of a good clue on, you know, get in there, get your elbow, get your knee, get your kids, roll it out really good until you can kind of feel that, you know, you can kind of feel the pot starting to slip away from it. And then again, you know, when they're heavy like this, I guess the one thing I could show you. Is that when they're heavy, like, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I've even had to cut pots off.
Oh, totally.
Like, you know, the plastic, you can just cut it with a pruner or
Absolutely.
a scissors or something if they're super root bound.
Definitely go from the top up here. It's not easy. This plastic is pretty thick, but you know, at the end of the day, if you're over it, just go ahead and cut it out if needs be. But again, with this one, it's so heavy, I can't hold it all by my hand. So I'm gonna hold it from the top, as opposed to on the other ones where I hold them all from the bottom. I'm gonna kind of hold this one from the top and just make sure that it's okay. And again, you can kind of feel like that seal release. And I try to use the holes at the bottom. I mean, and it's nice when they're a little woody and you can really just kind of grab a hold of, like a little arm. And again, I won't bother repeating our steps, but same thing, you can see that the root system like really kind of riddled around, and it looks really pretty, but probably not as healthy as it should be. So we're gonna get rid of it, but not right now. Woo!
Yeah, and I would say to your point, I mean, be sure to ask when you are in the nursery, ask, what is the appropriate soil for whatever you're buying. And
Right.
it's rare. There are some plants that don't like their roots to be
Totally.
massaged. So just just making sure, like, as you're leaving, just asking a nursery professional. We're happy to help with those questions. But this has been really helpful just to see, just what's the basic steps? Like, what do you need to do? How do you, I mean, I think just getting a plant out of a pot is so intimidating for people.
Totally. Yeah.
And I get it. I mean, I understand you don't want to kill it while you're like, before it's even in the ground,
Right.
And so I think that's really helpful to see that you don't necessarily have to be super gentle with it.
For sure. I mean, they are pretty resilient. I mean,
Mhm.
We work with a lot of very pretty, seemingly very delicate. We just got in like some princess flower and they're gorgeous, and there's some blooms and like, oh my God, as soon as you touch the flower, it like falls off. And so there are some you really want to be more careful with. But at the end of the day, it's better for them to lose some flowers now and to get healthy and get good soil and get into a better sized pot and all that than it is for them to stay there looking gorgeous, in a shoe that's too small.